Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Saïd Business School. My name's Lizzie Collins, and I have curated the current exhibition that we're launching tonight, In Pursuit of Beauty, and it's about entrepreneurship and enterprise and sustainability. It's a relaunch. For those of you who may have known before, we had the art programme running at the Saïd Business School from about 2017 to 2020. Sadly, it was one of the casualties of COVID, and it has been greatly missed. And I'm very grateful to Sumitra for allowing us to relaunch it. And it's really to put a focus on the links between art and business. And this time we're really delighted to have Renée Adams, Professor Renée Adams, who's speaking today, who's going to take the academic lead within the school so that the programme is really embedded within the teaching of the school. So why are we doing it? Not just, well, it's about art and business, as I've just said. And I've got a quote here that I found online this week, which I think it was about entrepreneurship, but I think it applies to artists. Big ideas, calculated risks, making mistakes, learning from failure, building on success, adapting strategies, and forging ahead. Now, that was written about entrepreneurship, but to me, that could be written about any artist and the activity of creating. I personally set up a business 10 years ago, Zuleika Gallery, 10 years this year, and that in itself is a creation. So I know, because I have a business myself, you create something out of nothing. Putting the rugs up, which I think has been a bit dark, which I have to apologise for, and hopefully you'll be able to come back and see a few more in the daylight. We'll also be able to go and see in the link corridor afterwards. But putting the rugs up over the weekend and then seeing people's reactions today as I came into the school and seeing how it's transformed the space, it feels that the art is not just about kind of an aesthetic influence. It feels like the art is there to stimulate conversation. It's doing so much more than just hanging on the walls. It's here to really invigorate and sustain on the one level, but it's also about a catalyst for conversations about entrepreneurship, sustainability, purpose and vision. So that's why we're doing it, and I'm so thrilled to be supported by our lovely speaker today, Christopher Springham. Has joined us from the Netherlands, especially to come and speak to us about his work in sustainability. But he trained, first of all, as a sculptor and as an art historian, and supports a group of responsible investors for Deutsche Bank, and has worked in sustainable. So I can't think of anybody I'd rather be launching Art at Saïd with. So thank you so much, Christopher, for coming. And Renée, also so grateful, the perfect lead within the school to be taking this forward. Renée's work, for those of you who don't know, is about gender bias, and gender bias in the boardroom, in financial institutions, but she's also turned her lens to looking at the real data and the uncomfortable truths about gender bias within the art world, within pricing of women's work versus male counterparts. So that's the background to what we're doing here. So lovely to see you all. It's being recorded as well, so do look back online later. And welcome to Christopher. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Lizzie, for the warm welcome and for the experience of partnering with Atelier Zuleika, who are behind this wonderful art programme. Thanks to the Dean and the faculty here at the school, and of course, thanks to Professor Adams for joining me in partnership today. Congratulations on the new art programme. It looks incredible. I so enjoyed going around earlier and seeing this incredible stuff on the walls. It's just interesting how it changes spaces, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. This is an enormous subject. How can art create value in business? Business and sustainability first, then art. I'm going to use, and I'm sorry to start with a lousy pun, but a very, very broad brush because we have to move quickly. But everyone in the room is brilliant, so we're going to go really fast, if that's all right with you. Who is this guy standing in front of you and why? I worked in the last century, yes, it's that long ago, in the oil industry. I worked for 12 years with Mobil Oil all around the world. They gave me my international business experience, My business education, which involved coming to institutions like this. They taught me a great deal about leadership, and they taught me rudimentary energy economics. And I think I proceeded well in that organisation. I was elevated to become the corporate spokesman for Mobil in the late 1990s, just outside with their headquarters just outside Washington, D.C. But I think I'm an energy pragmatist. And by the time of the millennium, my views and my politics were moving with the times. The climate change agenda was evolving. It was becoming a personal issue, not just something we read about in reports. I became a dad of 2 wonderful daughters, of whom I'm very proud. And I think that somehow it causes you to reflect less on yourself and more on what will happen to others and what kind of world we will live in. I wondered if I could find some work to help preserve or change the world. So I stepped away from the oil industry. I became a director of Rolls-Royce and then moved into political lobbying, and I was picked up by a group of private investors to go and help kickstart the wind industry. And during the last 20 years, together with wonderful colleagues, we literally invented the wind industry. We pioneered the green economy, taking our company LM Wind Power carbon neutral in 2018. I believe that that was one of the first global industrial businesses to do just that. We proved that greener businesses become leaner, and when they become leaner, they become more profitable. Sustainability, therefore, drives value. From a small Danish concern with 15 factories in 8 countries, 5 of which were in China, we became a global enterprise, and we were then bought by our biggest customer, GE, for $1.7 billion, which was a decent turn for our investors. And I think the biggest experience I had in that role was seeing the evolution of sustainability from a crankish concern to a professional priority in what I now regard to be every responsible boardroom. I allow the word responsible. I pressed my colleagues in GE to follow the same carbon neutrality pathway, and I got my closest female colleague appointed to make that happen. So now I can show by my own example that sustainability drives values in funds and companies. I'm very, very proud to say that one of the people who implemented GE's pathway to carbon neutrality in their production is sitting in this room now. Olivia, a little round of applause for Olivia, please. And I took the liberty of asking my former colleague what she thought of Olivia as an avatar for our green ideas. And her last appraisal, according to my colleague Lena, is this person has enough energy to power a city. More power to you. I now chair something called the Responsible Investment Forum in London. It's an annual meeting, the largest gathering of private investors with literally trillions under management, something above 50 trillion, we think. They're all seeking to drive environmental and social governance and to nurture societal change through sustainable business practice. Here, I think you can find everything you need to know about the rest of my whole life on that strange platform LinkedIn. But there's also a sort of a funny twist, as this is a young man with a great deal more hair than me, who was seconded to the White House to join the second Bill Clinton administration to assist with their international trade announcements. And I just think it's important to point out that while the oil industry can be challenging, it also presents unique opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have. That was then. As you can see, it's a pretty grim little set, and I noticed there was a Trump spokesman yesterday is standing in a brand new, very shiny TV studio. This absolutely wasn't, but, you know, progress is everything. Perhaps that is what gave me a continued interest in White House affairs. And that's my second dismal pun, given that I worked for Bill Clinton. So Trump-tastic is a compound adjective of my own making. The recently installed US president, he's described rather differently here on the cover of the British satirical magazine Private Eye, has been saying things like, drill, baby, drill, slash the rules. F the environment, expletive, deleted for the sensitive. Diversity is bunk, Professor. A vision of unrestrained and renewed capitalism without a conscience is not the whole truth. It's a current US truth. That truth is evolving around Western democracies, but I do firmly believe it's a Trump truth. The GDP of the US in the 2024 was just under 30 trillion, I think. So the private funds in the forum with which I work represent almost twice as much as US GDP. And I think I can justifiably claim that the trend towards impact investing is a tsunami of money away from polluting industry and towards socially responsible business. So, no, Mr. President, you can't cancel the environment. You can't reverse diversity and social equity programs for one obvious reason. They make really good business sense. Everybody knows, but some people who follow the work of experts in this field would recognize that high-performing organizations require diverse, purpose-led teams. And I spend most of my working life helping to create them. Money talks, and investors are bright enough to follow paths to long-term wealth creation rather than short-term political drum-banging. So this new green economy is here, and it's growing. We're now seeing the earth as an asset. We're beginning to understand what natural capital is, and this bold future beckons you. Was there a moment when I converted from being an apologist for the fossil fuels industry to becoming an advocate for green business? Was it a sort of a flash in the sky? And I think perhaps it was. There was one moment. In 2006, I was at a meeting of the Royal Geographical Society, primarily attended by oil company lobbyists, very expensive suits, and I met a gentleman wandering around with a brown envelope, and nobody was paying him a moment's attention. I was rather interested in him and his envelope, so we sat together and had a cup of tea. That was James Lovelock, and inside the envelope were pictures of the Arctic melt. I had no idea who he was at the time, so I crossed the road to Waterstones, just the other side of Piccadilly, and bought this book. I've since given away hundreds of copies of it. I read it on the bus home, and I think it did change my life. Gaia, as most people in the room already know, is the notion of Earth as our mother. It's a global idea which crosses many cultures, civilizations, and faiths, and together with our star, it's the source of all life. If we nurture her, we profit. If we don't nurture her and take more care, we will suffer. Later, I was introduced to another aspect of sustainability, which is circularity. And that's the notion that we should maximize our resources, look at what we deploy, and rather than waste, we should recycle and reuse. So this is the other book on my reading list, which was formative during those years. I'm sure you've all read them, but if you haven't, I recommend it. A general point then, as we move towards art and business, is that images are highly persuasive. I'm a persuader now. I go into boardrooms almost like an evangelist. In the boardroom of my own company, as I walked in, I had a very monoscopic but rather brilliant colleague called Lars. Last didn't think much of our sustainability drive. And I remember as I walked in, I think I'd got squeezed 10 minutes on the day-long agenda. He said, "Oh, here comes the green clown." So I obliged. And I stole their attention. And I can still just about keep it on long enough to read this bit of the things. It's really about gathering people to the idea. And I felt I had license to use any possible method to draw their attention. And this image is what helped me do it. I used to stand in front of groups with large decks, which were really about proving climate science. And they were well prepared, and I had a lot of data. And I felt that in a business environment, a lot of data was what the answer would be. But actually, this image says more. It replaced my climate graphs and still does. It won the case for sustainability in LM Wind Power's boardroom with 3 CEOs and then with 2 in GE. For the salespeople in the room, this is the killer close. It makes my arguments briefer and it makes them clearer. Hands up in the room, who has or had a mother? Hands up, please. Can I see? So we all agree. And I think we probably agree that mothers are important. Do we also recognise, perhaps, that the earth is indeed our mother? Why then would we spit in her face? Enough economics, enough evangelism. Let's talk about some art. It's true. Artists and business people can be really uncomfortable bedfellows. Clearly, the relationship between business and the arts is being tested, as recent activism indicates. There are some very difficult conversations going on in public relations departments of big corporations right now. And for institutions too. Denaming and shaming. To some degree, they're forced to bite the hand that feeds. How do we scrape the name Sackler off that pediment? How do you get soup off your Van Gogh? So I believe, however, that through art programs like the one introduced over the last few weeks in this institutions, these activities are a path to dialogue. However difficult the dialogue, they create conversations. They help us to make progress on contentious issues. They foster, to some extent, renewal and conflict resolution. So in another sense, art and business can actually be highly compatible bedfellows. And I hope to show you this through the presentation of just a few examples. Wearing another hat, I trained, as Lizzie mentioned, as an art historian, and I'm an art collector. I'm very, very blessed to live in 2 places, in Amsterdam and London. So recently I put much of my collection, it's about 100 pieces, about 80 in the gallery, into an online gallery. The Bridge Gallery code comes at the end, so you can look round it then. I thought you'd find yourself excited to go round in this virtual space when we should really be talking, so I left that slide to the end. But there's lots of stories behind each piece, and you can see here a beautiful Frank Stella, and there's a Roy Lichtenstein, a Damien Hirst, and all sorts of things for you to enjoy. There's also some digital art there, actually, and some really neatly rendered 3D objects. And most recently, I've been trying my hardest to balance the numbers by acquiring equivalent numbers of established and emerging female artists. I can't rewrite art history, but the point I'm making is I can help to rewrite an art future. And another art-related point I want to make with that is that it's small changes that create the waves in sustainability as in art. I sat in the Dean's office today talking to two of the most senior people in the faculty, and it was so obvious the effort that's going in to make small changes here. More power to that. I make no apologies for the slides because I deliberately kept them rather small in the writing where I'm trying to make a general point. I try to avoid graphs altogether, but this is a business school, so have some graphs. This is looking at art from my worldview as a collector of contemporary prints. Art is an asset class for investment in its own right, and in the last 7 years in particular, it's shown spectacular growth. You can see on the left, it's a selected group of contemporary artists, Damien Hirst, Basquiat, Keith Haring, Roy Lichtenstein. And just to prove the point, I'm really only interested in you looking at this figure here. It's about 15.8, and this figure here, it's about 30.7, 28 to 24, and that's just pulling out Andy Warhol's market performance alone. I know you're a business school, so you're all sitting there going, buy, sell, buy, sell, because you know what that means. It's a huge bump. Can anybody guess which artist is the bump? Good guess. Picasso's done really well. I mean, Picasso is an asset class in his own right. You cannot answer, I'm afraid, Lizzie. Anybody else? It's Banksy. Banksy, the street artist who shredded his work during a Sotheby's sale. And this is the Banksy bump, as it's known, which has ruined the numbers. But obviously people who sell art are all saying, oh yes, it's all part of a bigger plan. It's definitely going this way. It's a tremendous story about art as an asset. So my point here is really that art itself is a business and it's actually creating wealth. We've got to do the next topic. It's very difficult. You'll see somewhere familiar. Those of you who visited are still in awe because it stays with you your whole life. It's the Sistine Chapel ceiling. And I think once the church was the biggest customer for all art. And can you imagine what life was like for Pope Julius II? He just wanted to repaint the office. And then he had to deal with this angry, late, emotionally troubled, over-ambitious Michelangelo with a really sore back. Now it's the temples of Mammon, of glass and steel, that have the deepest coffers. Or perhaps said, the fattest wallets. And here's the aforementioned Frank Stella in Chase Manhattan Bank in downtown Manhattan. And if you just want to get a sense of scale and corporate ambition, and you want to get a bit of that bear mentality, that's the janitor. It's huge. I've actually read someone referring to Frank Stella being described as a foyer artist because the big corporations and banks love his work so much. The point I want to make here is that I often speak to artists about the art-business relationship dilemma, and they're desperate for funds to create ambitious new work and projects like the one here. And frankly, they also need to eat. They're always very concerned, however, that their funding aligns with their values and interests. Increasingly, sustainability, environment, social equity, they're all forming artistic practice. They're subjects for artwork. A responsible business deploying this kind of art in their offices can make it part of their community dialogue and celebrate it. We talked about the value of art. What about values? I mentioned Trump at the beginning. I think this is a political moment. In the US and arguably throughout Western democracies, there's a huge ideological schism. It's going on around values, from dogmatic so-called liberals to allegedly swivel-eyed libertarians. We're all seeing polarization, anger, and conflict. I'm just highlighting the difference here. I'm not celebrating one against the other. I hope you're okay with that. However, I find this notion of art as a social agent and a societal asset in the work of Joseph Beuys, the artist and theorist. Through his ideas, he creates this notion of social sculpture. He coined it in 1973, and directly linked art to social purpose and to the measurement of wealth beyond money through cultural growth. I think art can be a lotion for these ideological cuts and bruises. Many of you have, but if you haven't, read Beuys. He's fascinating. While profit is rightfully the defining goal of business, people, planet, environmental and social value can comfortably be considered to contribute to that, and art has a key role to play in creating social equity. Industry and, it's matchstick men and matchstick cats and dogs. I think that's how the song goes. When I was researching for this, I clicked on art and industry, and up came Lowry. I couldn't resist showing him. Industry and commerce was and still is an important topic for artists throughout the last century. And now perhaps gender, ethnicity, colonialism, climate change and human rights have moved more firmly to the fore. Oxford is no stranger to these discussions. I do sometimes wonder if the topics are more significant than the art itself. But smokestacks describe industrialization, the change that the society was going through at the time. And I think my reflection on it was this talks as much about the workplace and the social contract between employer and employee as it does about industry. What were these workers' rights? Some might suggest they're subjected by these mill owners, the mill owners of the dark satanic mills from Blake, working long hours in repetitive jobs, toxic environments, unsafe environments. There's no wellness program here. There are no free lattes in this picture, no duvet days, no ball pond, no work from home. I promised eye-catching examples, and when I think of this, you have to think of the word pride in body language, and that's what this is. You can't be more proud than this fantastic object. Created by Anthony Gormley. It's on a road as you drive northeast. It's absolutely huge. You can't actually drive by it without stopping. It's so big. I've tried to use examples from visual arts, sculpture, and all sorts of performance art, recycling, and we'll get to one other genre right at the end. But what does pride look like? It's the pride of industrial heritage. It's the pride of the North's economic potential, pride of the region's people. It's proud of the achievements of the past and the capabilities of the future. It's an industrial material which made them great. It's at a scale which says we're here, we're present. This is about creating a location, a destination. It's at the top of a specially created hill. Perhaps it's put the North back on the map in the public mind. This, for me, is levelling up. This is about positions. So let's come back to Oxford for a moment and to how I was introduced to the institution at Rhodes House by Lizzie. They've welcomed a new artist, Rebecca Kerrang, who's the left in the picture, with the Public Art Engagement Officer. Interesting role in the newly named hall. If Gormley's angel is positioning, this is about repositioning an institution. Top centre is a portrait of the activist Lucy Banda. She was the first female scholar from Zambia at Rhodes in 1978. Her portrait's been positioned to reclaim the power over a highly politicised space. Not to criticise the curation, I'd have gone up a bit with the nail, but I think she looks magnificent up there. And here's...
You had to hang on old nails because it's grade 2 star listed.
Okay. History for curation. And, to the left, well, boss Bill Clinton, and to the right, Bob Hawke, Prime Minister of Australia. She's in fantastic company, and I think she makes the place all the grander. But the best of all is it says this is a place looking forward. This is a place looking from our world ahead, and we can do so much to help people see and learn here. Hard to interpret this picture, but I will. This is Elsa Tomkowiak. I've been talking to you about places and how art is affecting places. She's represented by a brilliant gallery in Amsterdam called the Merchant House, which has drama and conversation and fantastic artists that you would never otherwise see. Elsa does this all herself. She's a modern Michelangelina, I suppose. I can't figure out how that goes in Italian. But she creates these giant, colourful, handmade installations and has decorated an entire hospital herself. She paints on recycled plastic and then she installs it in the corridors. She's lifting these really quite clinical, utilitarian spaces, not just for the healthcare people who work there, this is their workplace, but for those they care for. And there is a long, long series of lectures. I look forward to being welcomed back for it on the nature of the link between art and well-being. And there are many more eminent speakers than I to touch that topic. But they're certainly there. She's also done cathedrals. She's done palaces. She's done municipal buildings. And believe it or not, a lake. But the really cool trick in Elsa's work is she then recycles it, citing the location where the work first appeared. So one work of art is later regenerated as another. You can just see the little map showing you which one you've bought, where it came from. These are in the Bridge Gallery. You're very welcome to look at them when you visit later. And now, in a sort of almost miraculous coincidence, we're looking at a work of art which is happening now live in one of the biggest bank conference centres up an Alp in Austria. This is happening now as I speak to you. It's called Salon d'Amour. Let me explain. It's a brilliant performance piece demonstrating the power of authentic communication. This happens in groups. The groups of about 10, 18, something like that. I think 18 is the max. You have one reader who is reading from a set of prepared texts on the subject of love. They can be a haiku, they can be a limerick, they can be a sonnet, they can be a piece of writing from somebody in the developing world, they can be a historical text or something original. And they're talking to somebody who is wearing, as you can see, a very strange piece of headgear. It's a full-face mask, and they are works of art in their own right. They're wonderful handmade sculptures. But something goes on during this activity and event. The speaker is compelled to take enormous care with how they project the sentiment and feeling in the words. And while they do that, they're also conscious they get nothing back from the hooded figure next to them. The hooded figure is listening in a different way. Something about the mask and not having a visual signal or any kind of cue from the person reading to them is causing them to listen. It's art with ears, art with the voice. People who've been through it, and I've spoken to a number, describe it as transformative, as somehow creating a powerful somatic reaction, something linked perhaps to prayer or faith. But whatever it is, it's profoundly authentic communication. Bernard Shaw once said that the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place. And I'm going to take you back to my fantastic graphs, just to make a statement about what happens in boardrooms and in businesses. I think authentic communication is in extremely short supply except perhaps when there's an angry row in the corridor outside the boardroom. So much communication in business is implied, it's nuanced, it's in emails, copied to everyone just in case. It's totally unlike the kind of conversation that takes place in Salon d'Amour. And I do use behavioural exercises to point this out. So, for example, this is what I call the graveyard of communications. This is the way the majority of business presentations are done. And I'll just change the voice slightly so that we get to these are the data for here. And this is slide 106, by the way. And I've been talking to the wall now for about half an hour, and you're still with me as we go through this. This is the growth path inverted. Then I'm going to try and persuade you now to buy new computers for the whole department immediately, if that's all right. If anybody has something to say where they truly wish to persuade someone, would they ever put it on a PowerPoint slide? It's a crime. It's a crime against communications. What they should do is, find a prop. Maybe, let's have a statement here. Will you marry me? I don't think anyone's going to buy into that one. But if I take this, well, it's a prop, and I open it, and inside I find an incredible piece of finger furniture. Oh my goodness, it's ethically sourced, and it's about the size of a mortgage. And then I align the words, the music, and the dance. There's every chance that with some eye contact and with some care and some humility, that if I asked you, Oxford, will you marry me? Would I get a yes? Not one yes. The point I'm trying to make is that we kill with PowerPoint. We kill ideas with PowerPoint. I have a colleague who uses the phrase death by PowerPoint in order to filibuster board agendas. Oops, let's just quickly whiz back to where we were, because I've got just two further things to show you. And I think I can't resist this. I'm sorry, I talked to you about the wind industry. We have an incredible circularity problem in the wind industry. At the end of life of these wonderful blades which capture the wind and create clean power for all, we have to bring them down, and then we have to do something with all the composite material that's in them. And I'm proud to say that last year I set up a conference in Copenhagen, and we had the technologists there, and we had the investors there, and we had the OEMs there, the equipment manufacturers, and we were together with the bankers able to solve this. And there will be no problem with this composite waste. We have a chemical solution, solvolysis or pyrolysis. We have mechanical methods of dealing with this, and this year new plants will stream in Denmark, Germany, France, to return this stuff, the composite and the resin in the blades, to their original state, and also to manufacture other things based on that material. But this is in Rotterdam. It's right by the wonderful Erasmus Bridge in Rotterdam, and this is a really quite windy public space. It's right by the ferry terminal here. And it was really quite an uncomfortable place to be. We installed them first without any colour or coating, and no one came, and they looked a bit grim in the rain, and we were a bit disappointed. So we partnered with an artist, Mr. June, and he created the artwork to jazz them up a bit, and then with a partnership with the University of Delft, a coating was created, which enables boarders and skaters to use them without damaging the decoration. And this place is now buzzing. I mean, even on a fairly grim day, it's filled with people waiting and doing and having fun. And actually, it's become so popular that the mayor of Rotterdam is considering installing similar sculptures of this kind at every ferry arrival point. Art creates an outstretched hand in conflict. I'd only added one example from the performing arts. And for me, it's a cipher for many, many more. And I refer to it only because of its relevance to today's world and this particular moment of crisis. Edward Saïd, who's not your Saïd, I think, he's another Saïd, co-founded with Daniel Barenboim, the fabulous musician and composer, the West Eastern Divan Orchestra. My eldest daughter, I'm very proud, she wrote her undergraduate dissertation on this topic and made me aware of them. It comprises young people from all sides of the Israel-Arab conflict. Saïd describes this as a microcosm of a society that has never existed and may well never exist, which sounds prophetic. And I was nervous as I Googled to see if they still exist, only to discover to enormous delight and joy that, in fact, not only do they still exist, but they're going strong as ever, and they're touring in China in the first half of this year. So a wonderful enterprise, but true illustration of the power of art to create something above conflict. When we're in the pub later looking for a discussion about this, and you want that killer close for why should we bother with an art programme, might come up in the board, I guess. I hope it doesn't. I hope it's more power to the art programme. The simple argument, which wins it both for business and for all of us, I hope I've shown it to some degree, is that art makes the world a better place. I want to thank you so much for the opportunity, and I hope I'll see you all again.
Thanks so much for that, Christopher. So I'm sorry I don't have a nose. Oh, here's your gallery, but you can't watch. First, I have to speak. Okay, all right. So hi, everyone. I'm Renée Adams. I'm a professor of finance here, one of only 2 female finance professors. Thank you very much. I'm really interested in art, and thank you, everyone, for coming. I'd like to make the case for art, and the more that you attend these events, the more that we can make the case for art. So probably you're here because I'm preaching to the choir, but let me give you a bit of a perspective from a professor of finance, why art is so important for I think especially now in these very dark times, I would say. You can tell I'm American, probably from my accent. Very dark time to be an American, very dark time to be a woman. So I think art is very, very important for critical thinking. And what do we do at the business school? We teach people, we try to educate people. As an academic, you do research, you try to educate people and teach people. It's not about knowledge, it's about teaching people how to think. And I think art really plays an important role in helping shape thinking. So I'm going to try and illustrate my point. First, I'm going to give my perspective as an artist. Unlike Christopher, I'm not a trained artist, but I've been engaged in art making. You always, if anyone does art, at some point you're sort of like, at what point can I call myself an artist? It's always a bit tricky, but I'm going to call myself an artist. What I have here is a picture of something that I took to art school. So the way art school works, I don't know if any of you have gone to art school, but you get a brief. Everyone gets the same brief, right? So it's like you do this project, and then everyone goes away and approaches the project from a different perspective. And then you have what's called the crit. So everyone brings in their project, and then you have a group discussion, and everyone, you look at everyone's piece and how they've realized the idea, and people give constructive feedback. So this is something that I brought into a crit, and basically what it is, it's a plastic bag filled with chocolate wrappers. There was a point to the chocolate wrappers, so I'd collected them over a very long time. It's quite a large bag, you can't really see it. But anyhow, so crit was approaching. I didn't have much time to work on my piece. I was really stressed. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm like, I'm going to bring this bag of chocolate wrappers to Crit. And, you know, so everyone had this amazing sculptures. I have some of my fellow artists here that produce like amazing work. And I was like, oh my God, you know, all I have is this bag of chocolate wrappers. It's going to be horrible. And then anyhow, it was my turn for people to look at my piece. And they took it seriously. And so people started talking, and they were like, oh, well, the colors and an interesting shape, and what about if you put it like this way and whatever that way? And so at the end of the crit, our tutor, he turned to me and he said, Renee, do you realize that we've just spent half an hour talking about what's essentially a bag of garbage? And that to me really represents, you know, something amazing about the art world, which is that you will be able to look at a bag of garbage and see the beauty in that bag of garbage. And also, you know, every time I go to Crit, I'm like, oh my God, you know, there's a totally different way. Like, I have to be careful not to judge too quickly. And I think that's really important. So, you know, the exhibit today is about, you know, entrepreneurship and art. It's not just, so artists are entrepreneurs, but also how we view the art, I think is really important because it teaches us to think in a different way and to be innovative in our thinking, which I think is really important. Okay, now I'm going to give my perspective as an academic. So I also research the art world. Next week is European Equal Pay Day. Yes, exactly. And so why do we have a problem with equal pay still nowadays? You know, the reaction says a lot, right? Why do we still have a problem with equal pay? This is a really, really big question. And I think the art world can help answer this question. So what I have here is I have a picture. I'll explain what it's about. Basically, it's prices of artworks. And the prices come from something that's called a secret postcard auction. So I don't know if you've seen these secret postcard auctions, but a lot of charities, like this data is from the Royal West Academy. It's an art school. And in order to fund some of their programs, they have secret postcard auctions, which essentially means that artists produce postcard-sized works of art, and these are then auctioned off. And the key point is that it's secret. You don't know who the artist is. So why would anyone buy this art? Well, because they get famous artists to participate. So in fact, in my data here, Anthony Gormley was one of the artists who painted a postcard. And so, of course, people bid on these postcards because they hope to get a Gormley, right? Okay, so what is this picture showing? So what I did is I said, well, look, it's secret, so you don't know the gender of the artist, right? But if they're very famous artists, you might be able to infer who painted the postcard, right? Because they're very famous, so you know the style. Okay, so I took the prices for the postcards, the auction prices. And here what you see are the prices. The red bars are the prices for the male artists. The blue bars are the prices for the female artists. And what's the difference between the left and the right? On the right, these are the very famous artists that were used to attract people into the auction. And on the left, these are the not famous. These are not the big names. Okay, so what's the point in the graph? You see, when people don't know the artists, there's no difference in price for male and female artists. When people know the artists, look at the size of that bar. For the male artists versus the female artists, there's a big gender difference, right? So when people know the identity, then they're going to pay more for the male artists than for the female artists. And maybe you will have noticed that in the slide that Christopher presented, with the PowerPoint, with all the graphs, all the famous artists were male, right? And so what is the point here? So is it the fact that there could be many explanations for why women don't receive the same pay as men, but what this highlights is that identity really matters and that there are cultural biases towards women that play a role in their pay. Because when it's blind, there's no difference in price. Okay, so let me just, drinks are waiting. Let me talk a bit about what I've been trying to do here in terms of bringing art into teaching. So I think it's a very powerful tool to help with teaching. What I have here, I'll explain a bit what this is. This is a piece that I did last year with my students, executive MBA students, and the piece is called Bringing Home the Bacon. I'll show you a close-up in a second. So this is the Thatcher Business Education Center as part of the business school. And what I had my students do, so you see there's a big piece of bacon here. I had my students come out of the Thatcher Business Education Center carrying this giant soft sculpture of a piece of bacon. And so here we have sort of maybe a very sort of white man bringing home the bacon, right? Here we have a man with dyed hair, a little less conventional, bringing home the bacon. And here we have a woman bringing home the bacon. And so when you put it, so each one of these pictures is one of my executive MBAs bringing home the bacon. And the point of the artwork was to illustrate that there's so much more diversity now in terms of who brings home the bacon, in terms of who makes money, and who's actually involved in the professional workforce. And that is something that we also have to recognize and celebrate. All right, so that's it for me. Thank you very much for coming, and please do continue to support the program because the more you attend and the more you support it, the more we can use art to help shape our thinking. All right.
Thank you, Renée, and thank you, Christopher, two fabulous speakers to set us off. If anybody's got any questions, I think there's an online community as well that we might have some questions from, but I think Renée and Christopher could answer some questions if anybody had anything specific. Otherwise, we could invite you to come into the link corridor and see some of the rugs. The ones we have in the link corridor are from sort of the 1920s and 30s. They're the Omega group, so it's really nice the way the rugs are looking at contemporary artists and more historic artists as well. So I do invite you to come and have a look. So if there are no questions, I just want to thank you both. And for everybody, like Renée says, for turning up and supporting this launch. And we hope to see you all again another time. Thanks a lot.